The first story begins on a chilly October evening 2 years after my parents divorced. Dad wanted us to stay close with Mom even though the court said he didn't have to, so he drove me, my sister Jess, and my brothers Mike and Eli across town to her little apartment. The place sat in a rough neighborhood full of tall brick buildings that looked empty even when cars lined the streets. Mom's unit was on the second floor right beside a narrow alley that served as the main way into the complex. You had to know it was there or you'd never find it, just a long stretch of shadows between two walls. Inside, the apartment felt warm and safe. Soft couches, knickknacks on every shelf, the kind of cozy that reminded me of Grandma's house. Downstairs lived two kids we played with whenever we visited, a boy named Zach and his little sister Chi-Chi. Zach and I spent hours in the parking lot pretending to be cops or playing tag. That visit we decided to celebrate the season with hide and seek after dark. Zach suggested 9 o'clock sharp, when the sky turned black and the orange street lamps painted everything spooky. Jess, Mike, Eli, Zach, Chi-Chi, and I all agreed. At 9 we slipped outside. The lamps buzzed overhead and threw long shadows across the cracked pavement. We played bubblegum in a dish to pick the seeker and Zach lost. He covered his eyes and started counting while the rest of us scattered. I stuck with Jess because she was the oldest and always knew what to do. We jogged past the dumpsters and into the alley, figuring no one would bother coming that far. The air smelled like wet leaves and garbage. We crouched behind the big metal bins and waited. At first the quiet felt exciting, hearts pounding, trying not to giggle. Minutes dragged on. Crickets chirped. A car rumbled somewhere far away. Jess whispered that someone would find us soon. I got restless and suggested we give up. She laughed softly and said maybe we hid too well. We stepped out from the bins and started back down the alley. Halfway through I looked toward the far end and froze. Under the single bulb at the mouth of the alley stood a tall figure. Street lamp light poured straight down so the face stayed hidden beneath a huge colorful afro wig. The body wore baggy polka dot pants and oversized shoes, exactly like a clown. My stomach flipped. It was early October, not Halloween. The figure never moved, just stared. Jess grabbed my sleeve and pulled me backward. She said we needed to find the others. We hurried along the wall until we spotted Mike and Chi-Chi near the corner of the building. Mike asked why we were walking in the open. We told them about the clown. To prove it we edged forward and pointed. The clown had moved closer. Now we saw the face painted solid black with only white eyes shining. It lifted one gloved hand and waved slowly. Chi-Chi screamed and pointed behind us. Another clown stood there, taller, green wig, same blacked out face. We bolted. Chi-Chi raced to her apartment. Jess, Mike, and I pounded up the stairs to Mom's place. Eli was already inside talking fast to Mom. He said he had hidden in the courtyard bushes when footsteps approached. He thought it was Zach until Zach's voice called from the other side. Eli looked up and a clown stared down at him through the leaves. He and Zach ran straight to tell their parents. Mom hugged us tight and said she was glad everyone was safe. We thought the night ended there. Hours later thirst woke me. The apartment lay dark and quiet. I padded to the kitchen, grabbed a water bottle, and heard a soft tap against the window. The window sat high on the second floor. No tree branches reached it. Curiosity overruled fear. I lifted the blind. The same clown from the alley pressed its black face against the glass, colorful wig brushing the pane. I screamed and dropped the bottle. Mom rushed in. When we looked again the window showed only empty night. Mom believed me anyway. She locked every door and window and let me sleep in her bed. Morning came gray and cold. No sign of clowns anywhere. I never played hide and seek after dark again and still hurry past any alley. The second story starts the same October when I was 11 and in 6th grade. My school sat across the street from an old 2-story house that looked ready to collapse. Peeling paint, broken shutters, weeds taller than the porch rails. Every afternoon my friends and I walked past it on the way home. They called it the witch house and made jokes. I told them to stop because the owner might hear. They laughed and said I scared too easy. Early in the month my friends stayed late for clubs, leaving me to walk alone. The first strange day I noticed a shape in the upstairs window, tall and still, watching the sidewalk. I sped up and told myself it was nothing. The next afternoon the shape stood in the same spot. I couldn't tell age or gender, just a dark outline against dusty glass. By the end of the week I took a longer route to avoid the house. My friends said it was probably an early Halloween prank. I wanted to believe them. One Thursday the sky hung low and gray. I passed the house and saw the silhouette on the porch instead of the window. It wore a long coat and hat pulled low. I forced my legs to keep normal speed. Sudden heavy boots thumped down the steps. The figure sprinted toward me yelling words that made no sense, high-pitched then low, like two voices fighting. I ran. My backpack bounced hard against my spine. The footsteps gained. I cut into the first alley I saw and dove behind a dumpster that reeked of rotten food. I crouched, lungs burning, and listened. Boots scraped pavement right at the alley entrance. Mumbling grew louder, then softer, then stopped. I counted to 100 before peaking. Empty. I sprinted the last blocks home and burst through the door crying. Dad called the police. 2 officers arrived, took my story, and promised to check the house. Next morning they returned. The place had stood vacant for 8 years. No electricity, no water, boards nailed over the back door. They figured a squatter camped inside and decided to scare a kid for fun. Nothing more came of it. 22 now, I still cross the street when an old house looks wrong. The third story happened in rural Poland where Halloween barely exists. Old folks call it devil worship, but younger families stack pumpkins on porches anyway. I walked my big dog Susie every evening because daylight brought too many kids on bikes she tried to chase. October nights drop fast and dark. Street lamps barely glow. One night at 8 the road felt empty and peaceful, forest on the left, horse fields on the right. Crunching leaves and cold wind wrapped around me. Susie trotted calm until we neared the old parish stable, unused since before I was born. She exploded into barking, lunging toward the trees. I scanned the shadows and saw a person kneeling maybe 15 meters away, back straight, wearing a flowing white robe that caught moonlight. No face visible, just the shape. Susie pulled harder. I yanked her harness and speed walked toward the church lights ahead. Every few steps I glanced back. Nothing followed. At home I locked the door and tried to forget. Around 2 in the morning sirens screamed for half an hour. Morning news said teenagers probably set the stable on fire as a prank. I knew better. The figure I saw stayed calm and silent, not giggling or drunk. 5 hours between sighting and flames. Had he knelt there the whole time? Were others hidden inside? I never learned. Susie and I stick to daylight now. The fourth story takes place last October right after school. My friends and I piled into Kevin's mom's van headed for a small pumpkin patch 10 minutes away. Crisp air, colorful trees, the smell of cider and donuts drifting everywhere. Families wandered rows of orange pumpkins. Kids laughed. We grabbed a red wagon and hunted the perfect ones. Kevin dared me to fetch the giant pumpkin at the very back near the woods. The path narrowed. Voices faded. Trees closed overhead. Late sun threw long shadows. Wind hissed through branches like whispers. Behind the farthest pumpkin stood a figure, arms out like a scarecrow, white hat low over the face. Too thin for straw. The hat lifted slightly with breathing. I whispered to Kevin. He glanced and said it was decoration. I snatched the pumpkin fast. Walking back I kept checking. The figure seemed closer each time. At the row's edge it vanished. Relief lasted until we passed the woods again paying for our haul. A branch snapped sharp behind us. Kevin didn't hear. I turned. The figure stood 10 feet away, arms down, head tilted. Then it glided forward without lifting feet, leaves rustling too fast. I grabbed Kevin and we ran, wagon rattling. At the crowded stand the figure stopped at the tree line and watched. We threw pumpkins in the van and peeled out. Kevin swore he saw nothing but trees. Days later an online post described the exact same patch, same time, same gliding costume. I never returned. Every fall the memory returns clear as frost on the window. These 4 nights share the same chill. Ordinary October evenings turn strange the moment shadows stretch too far. A game of hide and seek summons silent clowns to an alley no one should enter. A lonely walk past an empty house ends in a chase by a yelling stranger who shouldn't exist. A quiet dog walk reveals a white-robed watcher kneeling hours before flames consume an abandoned stable. A dare for the biggest pumpkin unveils a gliding figure that follows without footsteps. Children and dogs sense danger first. Adults explain away what reason cannot hold. Police find no footprints, no owners, no answers. Years later the fear remains fresh, triggered by a dark alley, a boarded window, a rustle in the woods, a lone pumpkin left too far from the crowd. October arrives innocent with hayrides and candy, yet somewhere in every town the darkness keeps its own calendar. It waits for the one night lamps burn orange and leaves whisper secrets. It waits for the moment a child steps just past the light. And when that happens, the game begins whether anyone counts to 10 or not. Below is the extended 5,000-word version of the story, written in simple paragraphs with plain text narration. The hook remains the same, and the 4 original stories are expanded with additional details, atmosphere, character depth, and sensory descriptions to reach the word count while maintaining the creepy October vibe. The first story starts on a crisp October night 2 years after my parents split up. I was 9, old enough to feel the ache of a broken family but young enough to get excited about seeing Mom. Dad didn't have to let us visit her. The divorce papers said he could keep us full-time if he wanted, but he was trying to be the good guy. So he packed me, my sister Jess, and my brothers Mike and Eli into his old blue sedan and drove us across town to Mom's apartment. The neighborhood wasn't the kind you see on postcards. Tall brick buildings loomed like tired giants, their windows dark even when the streets were full of parked cars. Graffiti tagged the walls, and the air smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. Mom's place sat on the second floor of a squat complex tucked beside a narrow alley. That alley was the only way in unless you knew a back gate no one used. It stretched long and dim, lit by a single flickering bulb that buzzed like a dying insect. You could drive through it if you were brave, but most people walked fast and kept their eyes down. Inside Mom's apartment, though, everything felt safe. The door creaked open to a wave of cinnamon and vanilla from a candle on the coffee table. The couch sagged in all the right places, covered in mismatched pillows. Little ceramic cats and fake flowers cluttered every shelf, the kind of stuff that made you think of grandmas and warm hugs. Mom was small, barely 5 feet, with curly brown hair and a smile that made the world softer. She wrapped us in hugs that smelled like lavender lotion and told us she'd missed us. Downstairs lived Zach and Chi-Chi, neighbors we'd met on earlier visits. Zach was my age, all freckles and energy, always ready to turn the parking lot into a battlefield for cops and robbers. Chi-Chi was 7, tiny with pigtails, but she kept up with us like a pro. That visit we spent the afternoon kicking a soccer ball around the cracked asphalt, dodging puddles from the morning rain. The sky turned pumpkin orange as the sun dipped, and Zach got an idea. "Hide and seek," he said, grinning. "But at night, it's almost Halloween. Gotta make it spooky." We all agreed. Jess, who was 12 and bossy in the best way, said 9 o'clock sharp. Mike, 10 and always hungry, wanted to eat first. Eli, 8 and quiet, just nodded, his eyes wide with the promise of adventure. Mom made us spaghetti with meatballs, the sauce thick and tangy, and we ate on paper plates because the dishwasher was broken. By 8:30 the sky was black, stars hidden behind city haze. The street lamps glowed rusty orange, painting the parking lot in Halloween colors. We slipped outside, 6 kids buzzing with excitement. The air was cold enough to see our breath. Leaves skittered across the pavement like tiny ghosts. We stood in a circle near the mailboxes and played bubblegum in a dish to pick the seeker. My heart thumped as the rhyme went round and round. Zach lost. He groaned but covered his eyes against the lamppost and started counting loud. 1, 2, 3. Jess grabbed my hand. "Come on," she whispered. We ran together, sneakers slapping the ground. Mike and Eli bolted toward the courtyard. Chi-Chi giggled and darted behind a parked van. Jess and I headed for the alley, figuring it was the last place anyone would look. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and old grease. Puddles reflected the dim light. We passed the dumpsters, big green bins overflowing with trash bags, and crouched at the far end where the building's back wall met a chain-link fence. The bulb overhead flickered, making shadows jump. At first it was fun, pressing against the cold metal, trying not to laugh. Jess put a finger to her lips. We listened to Zach's voice echoing faintly, "Ready or not, here I come." Minutes passed. Crickets chirped. A dog barked somewhere far off. The excitement faded into boredom. I shifted, my knees aching on the gravel. Jess whispered that someone would find us soon. I said maybe we hid too well. She smiled, her teeth white in the dark. "Want a forfeit?" she asked. I nodded. We stood and brushed off our jeans, stepping out from the bins. Halfway down the alley I looked toward the exit and stopped dead. Under the bulb at the far end stood a figure. Tall, way taller than Dad, like someone stacked shoes inside their shoes. The light poured straight down, hiding the face under a massive colorful afro wig, red, blue, yellow curls exploding like a cartoon. Baggy polka dot pants, oversized red shoes, white gloves. A clown. My brain screamed it was wrong. Halloween was weeks away. The figure didn't move, just stood there, head tilted slightly. Staring. Jess's grip tightened on my arm. "We're going back," she said, voice low. We turned and hurried along the wall, staying in the shadows. My heart pounded so loud I swore it echoed. We found Mike and Chi-Chi near the corner where the alley met the parking lot. Mike was crouched behind a sedan, Chi-Chi beside him. "Why are you out in the open?" Mike hissed. Jess told them about the clown. To show them, we crept forward and pointed. The clown had moved. Closer. Maybe 20 feet away now. The black painted face was visible, no features except gleaming white eyes. It raised one gloved hand and waved, slow, like it knew we were watching. Chi-Chi let out a sharp scream. "There's another one," she yelled, pointing behind us. We spun. Another clown stood at the alley's other end. Taller, thinner, green wig trailing to its waist. Same black face, same white eyes. It didn't wave, just stared. The air felt thick, like breathing soup. Jess yelled, "Run!" Chi-Chi sprinted for her apartment door. Mike followed. Jess and I raced for the stairs to Mom's place, legs burning. Eli was already inside, sitting on the couch, face pale. Mom knelt beside him, arms around his shoulders. We spilled through the door panting. Eli's voice shook as he told his story. He'd hidden in the courtyard behind a scraggly bush. Footsteps crunched closer. He thought it was Zach until Zach's voice called from the other side, "Eli, I found you." Eli looked up. A clown loomed over the bush, black face inches away, colorful wig brushing the leaves. Eli screamed and ran. He and Zach bolted to Zach's apartment and told their parents. Mom listened to our story, her face tight. She hugged us all so hard my ribs hurt. "You're safe," she kept saying. She checked every lock twice and made us hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. We thought it was over. The apartment felt like a fortress. Jess and I shared the pull-out couch. Mike and Eli took the floor with sleeping bags. Mom left the hall light on. I fell asleep to the hum of the fridge. Hours later thirst clawed me awake. The clock glowed 2:17 a.m. The apartment was dark except for the nightlight in the bathroom. I tiptoed to the kitchen, bare feet cold on the linoleum. Grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. Then I heard it, tap tap tap, against the living room window. The window was high, second floor, no balcony, no tree nearby. My skin prickled. I told myself it was a bird or the wind. But the tapping continued, steady, like knuckles on glass. I crept to the window and lifted the blind a crack. The clown stared back. Same afro wig, same black face, same white eyes. Its nose almost touched the glass. It tilted its head, slow, like it was studying me. I screamed. The bottle hit the floor and rolled. Mom burst in, hair wild, wearing an old t-shirt. "What is it?" she gasped. I pointed, shaking. She yanked the blind up. The window showed only empty night, the parking lot lamps flickering below. No ladder, no clown, nothing. Mom believed me anyway. She pulled me to her bed and let me sleep curled against her. Morning came gray and quiet. No footprints under the window. No wig fibers. Nothing. Mom called Dad to pick us up early. I never played hide and seek in the dark again. Alleys still make my stomach twist. The second story happened the same October, when I was 11 and in 6th grade. My school was a boxy brick building across from a house that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. 2 stories, sagging roof, paint peeling in long gray strips. The porch leaned to one side. Windows were boarded or cracked. Weeds choked the yard, some taller than me. Every afternoon my friends, Lila, Marcus, and Sam, walked past it on the way home. They called it the witch house and made up stories about ghosts or a crazy lady who ate kids. I told them to shut up. What if someone lived there and heard? They laughed and said I was scared of everything, from spiders to angry teachers. They weren't wrong. I jumped at loud noises and hated getting in trouble. Early October my friends started staying late for soccer or art club, leaving me to walk alone. The first weird day was a Tuesday. The sky was low and gray, the air damp. I passed the house, backpack heavy with books. Movement caught my eye. In the upstairs window stood a tall shape, still as a statue, watching the sidewalk. No face, just a dark outline against dusty glass. My steps quickened. I told myself it was a curtain or a trick of the light. The next day the shape was there again. Same window, same spot. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman, old or young. Just a silhouette. By Thursday I took the long way around the block, adding 10 minutes to my walk. My friends heard about it and said it was probably someone decorating early for Halloween, trying to scare kids. I wanted to believe them. I scolded myself for being a coward. The following Monday the sky hung heavy with rain that never came. I passed the house, head down, humming to stay calm. The silhouette wasn't in the window. It was on the porch. Tall, wearing a long coat and a hat pulled low. It stood by the railing, hands in pockets. I forced my legs to keep normal speed, heart hammering. Don't run, I thought. Running looks guilty. Then boots thumped hard down the steps. The figure sprinted toward me, coat flapping. It yelled words that made no sense, high squeals mixed with low growls, like a radio stuck between stations. I screamed and ran. My backpack bounced, books digging into my spine. The footsteps were fast, too fast. I cut left into an alley I'd never used before. It stank of rotten food and cat pee. I dove behind a dumpster, crouching in spilled soda and grease. My lungs burned. I held my breath. Boots scraped at the alley's mouth. Mumbling grew louder, then softer, circling. I peeked through a gap. The figure stood 10 feet away, head swiveling. The hat hid its face. It muttered nonsense, words overlapping like a broken tape. I pressed against the dumpster, praying the smell hid me. The muttering stopped. Silence stretched. Then footsteps ran the other way, fading fast. I counted to 200, legs shaking. The alley was empty. I sprinted the last 6 blocks home, tears streaming. I burst through the door and collapsed, sobbing. Mom dropped her phone. Dad called the police. 2 officers came, a man and a woman, both calm. I told them everything, the window, the porch, the chase, the alley. They wrote it down and said they'd check the house. Dad drove me to school the next morning. The officers returned at dinner. The house was vacant, they said. Had been for 8 years. No power, no water, back door boarded shut. They figured a squatter crashed there and got a kick out of scaring kids. Case closed. My friends were stunned. Even Marcus, who never believed anything, went quiet. I'm 22 now, but I still cross the street when I see a house with broken windows. The third story comes from rural Poland, where I grew up in a village surrounded by fields and forest. Halloween wasn't a thing when I was a kid. Old folks said it was satanic, a Western trick to corrupt souls. Some younger families carved pumpkins anyway, stacking them on porches with candles inside. I was 16, tall for my age, with a big mutt named Susie who weighed almost as much as me. She was sweet but hated kids on bikes and anyone jogging. Daytime walks were chaos, barking, lunging, me apologizing to strangers. So every evening at 8 I took her out when the roads were empty. October nights fell fast. By 7:30 the sky was black, stars sharp overhead. Street lamps were old and dim, some flickering like they were about to die. My favorite route was a short road from the village shop to the church. 10 minutes if you walked slow. Forest on one side, horse pastures on the other. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Leaves crunched underfoot. I loved the quiet, the way the cold bit my cheeks. One night Susie trotted calm, nose to the ground. I was lost in thought, thinking about school and a girl I liked. We neared the end of the road where the forest met an old stable owned by the parish priest. It hadn't been used since the 80s, roof half caved, doors hanging loose. Susie froze. Her ears shot up. Then she went wild, barking, growling, pulling so hard the leash cut my hand. I scanned the road. No bikes, no dogs, no people. She stared at the stable and the trees beyond. The street lamp barely reached, painting everything gray. I squinted into the shadows and saw it. 15 meters away, just past the stable, a figure knelt in the dirt. Back straight, arms at sides. It wore a white robe that caught the moonlight, glowing like a ghost. No face visible, just the shape. Not hiding, but not standing in the open either. My skin crawled. Susie lunged again. I yanked her harness and hissed, "Come on." I didn't want to run and draw attention, but my legs moved fast. The church was a minute away, its windows warm with light. I glanced back every few steps. The figure never moved. No one followed. At home I locked the door and gave Susie treats to calm her. I tried to laugh it off, maybe a kid playing a prank. Sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 a.m., sirens wailed, loud and close, for half an hour. Morning news said the priest's stable burned to the ground. Police blamed drunk teenagers pulling Halloween stunts. I knew better. The figure I saw was calm, patient, kneeling like a statue. 5 hours between my walk and the fire. Had he stayed there the whole time? Were others inside, hidden? I never told anyone what I saw. Who would believe a kid and her dog? Susie and I stuck to daylight after that. Every fall the memory returns when the air turns sharp and the forest goes quiet. The fourth story happened last October, senior year of high school. My friends, Kevin, Sarah, and Jamal, planned a trip to a pumpkin patch 10 minutes from school. The final bell rang, and we piled into Kevin's mom's minivan, backpacks tossed in the trunk. The air was cold and crisp, leaves blazing red and gold. The patch was small but packed. Families wandered rows of pumpkins. Kids darted between wagons. A stand sold cider and donuts that smelled like heaven. We grabbed a red wagon and hunted for the perfect pumpkins. Sarah wanted a tall one for carving. Jamal picked small ones for painting. Kevin dared me to find the biggest pumpkin at the back, near the woods. I laughed and took the bet. The path narrowed as we walked. Voices faded. Trees closed in, their branches knitting a canopy overhead. Late sun threw long shadows across the dirt. Wind hissed through leaves, sounding like whispers. My sneakers crunched on twigs. At the farthest row stood a massive pumpkin, orange and smooth. Behind it, near the tree line, was a figure. At first I thought scarecrow, arms out, wide hat, still as stone. Then the hat lifted slightly, like someone breathing underneath. Too thin for straw. Guys, I whispered, you see that? Kevin glanced and shrugged. Decoration, he said. Sarah was busy photographing pumpkins. My stomach knotted. I grabbed the big pumpkin fast, hefting it into the wagon. We started back. I kept checking over my shoulder. The figure seemed closer each time, though it never moved its legs. At the row's edge it vanished. Relief washed over me. Probably a worker in costume, I thought. We headed to the stand to pay. The path was darker now, sun almost gone. Passing the woods again, a branch snapped sharp behind us. Kevin didn't hear. I stopped. You hear that? He shook his head. I turned. The figure stood 10 feet away, arms down, head tilted like a curious dog. Then it moved. No steps, no sound. It glided over the leaves, closing the gap fast. Leaves rustled too loud, too quick. I grabbed Kevin's arm. Run. The wagon rattled as we sprinted. Pumpkins bounced. My heart slammed against my ribs. We burst into the crowded main area, families laughing, oblivious. I looked back. The figure stopped at the tree line, hat low, watching. We paid in a blur and threw the pumpkins in the van. Kevin's mom raised an eyebrow at our panic but didn't ask. On the drive Kevin swore he saw nothing but trees. Sarah and Jamal were silent. That night I couldn't sleep. The figure's glide replayed in my head, smooth and wrong. Days later I found a post online. Someone reported a strange costumed person at the same patch, same time, moving without walking. No names, no photos, just the story. I never went back. Every October the memory hits when the leaves fall and the air smells like cider. I picture it waiting at the edge of the woods, patient, silent. These 4 nights weave together like threads in a nightmare. A game meant for laughs summons clowns to an alley where no one belongs. A lonely walk past a dead house ends with a chase by a voice that isn't human. A quiet evening with a dog reveals a robed watcher kneeling hours before flames rise. A dare for a pumpkin unveils a gliding shadow that follows without sound. Kids feel the danger first, hearts racing, dogs barking, instincts screaming. Adults explain it away. Pranksters, squatters, decorations. Police find no footprints, no wig fibers, no ash from a white robe. The fear stays, sharp as frost on a windowpane. Years later it returns with the first orange leaf, the first cold breeze, the first long shadow at dusk. October looks innocent, hayrides, candy, jack-o'-lanterns grinning on porches. But somewhere in every town, the darkness keeps its own clock. It counts down to the night the lamps burn low and the leaves whisper secrets. It waits for the moment a child steps one pace too far from the light. And when that happens, the game begins, whether anyone says, "Ollie ollie oxen free," or not.